Mariah May. She is the #1 contender for the AEW Women's Championship against timeless Toni Storm. She's out there with Luther, is Toni Storm. Mariah May, she's out there after turning her back on Toni Storm after winning the Owen Hart Cup Invitational in one of the most savage beatdowns in AEW history, one of the greatest endings to AEW Dynamite of all time. What was that ending? Excellent. It really took the feud to the next level. Now, they kind of fizzled out after that. I thought what they did was perfect. It needed to happen then to get this match here. But after that, it kind of fizzled out. A couple of pull-apart brawls. There was a couple of vignettes, one by Toni and a couple by Mariah. Nothing too crazy in the build on TV between these two. They were basically out of gas in the last 3 or 4 weeks. But this made up for everything, because this match was tremendous. This was the best that we've seen Mariah look. This was the best we've seen Toni Storm look in ring under this current gimmick. You got a mixture of Toni in character, and you got rock and roller Toni Storm in this match, from what you remember for what she does in the ring. This was a perfect mixture of both versions of Toni Storm. This was the best in-ring version of Toni we've seen under this current gimmick in this title reign. This was tremendous. 9 months in the making, and this was exactly how it needed to be. The outcome was exactly what it needed to be. May's mother was sitting at ringside, and I think commentary said this was the second time that she's only seen her daughter wrestle since she started wrestling. So she's in there watching her daughter in the biggest show in company history. So Toni eventually makes her way out to the ring, and Storm's entrance consisted of a picture of her at Wembley Stadium in 1924 before Luther made his return to the stage. And the bell rings. We get our introductions. We get a stare down. And both ladies, this is the way the match needed to start off, man. I'm so glad that they went into this brawling it out, man. This was a fucking dugout, clearing dugout type of brawl in the MLB, man. This is exactly what it needed to be. Both ladies throwing fists like a fucking hockey fight. Boom. They started off brawling. I didn't want to see this shit start off with a fucking collar and elbow tie-up, which then led to a fucking side headlock takedown and then a fucking rest hold for 60 seconds. No. That's not what it needed to be. They did exactly what they needed to do here to start the match. So we got a big fight, and Mariah May hits a shotgun drop kick on Toni to swing the match in her direction. They showed Mina Shirakawa up in the skybox watching this from the crowd. Toni Storm started no-selling chops that led to a chop battle between both ladies. Storm faked a high knee and hit a DDT, but May avoided a hip attack in the ropes and connected with the powerbomb out to the floor. All of a sudden, Luther's getting involved, and Mariah May turns around and spits right in Luther's face. Mariah does the Mariah go-round, spinning side slam, and that kept her in control. We get a head scissors out of the corner as May slaps Storm, bringing her to her knees. So we got May laying out Toni, and this was very similar to what we got in Calgary when she won the Owen Hart final. She was on her knees, and she planted a kiss right on Toni's forehead. But Toni gets up, gets a second win. She starts to fight back, and then she was eventually taken out by Mariah May with a big back suplex. Storm rolled to the outside. May hits a running, leaping knee off the apron, and she's just brutalizing Toni on the outside. May walked over and all of a sudden planted a kiss on the forehead of Nigel McGuinness, who he was in heaven at that point. And then she goes to shotgun dropkick Luther and blasts him into the barricade. So she is absolutely possessed here. Goes to kiss Nigel, and then she dropkicks Luther, who had no business getting dropkicked, but she doesn't give a shit. She then walked over to her mother, did Mariah May. And this shocked the shit out of me, man. She slapped the fucking taste out of her mother's mouth, man. Slapped the shit out of her mother And Toni Storm flies in with a hip attack through the ropes and a Storm Zero that followed on the steel steps, which eventually busted Mariah May open, and she started bleeding. If there was one match on this night that needed color, it was this match. Toni Storm walks over to Mariah's mother, and she consoles her into her bosom. Mariah May's bleeding. Storm unloaded 10 punches back inside the ring, multiple punches from Toni. Mariah May was sent flying. Storm went for a big roundhouse shot, only for Mariah May to spit in her face. She spit in Luther's face. She spit in Toni Storm's face. No respect from Mariah. Toni Storm hits a choke bomb for a 2 count. Mariah May fights back. Big corner high kick, missile drop kick from the top. Multiple sweet chic musics from Toni. From Mariah, rather. She was using Toni's own move against her. She went for 3 sweet chic musics, did Mariah. She went for a 4th. But Toni popped up and no-sold the 3 and popped up with a huge lariat and a German suplex, and then she went right into a sweet chic music of her own, followed up by a quick Storm Zero, which Mariah May kicked out of. So Mariah May, after the Storm Zero, is in trouble. She looks up at Toni. She gives Toni Storm the middle finger. They start slapping each other repeatedly, and both ladies were legitimately slapping the shit out of each other, man. Real stuff. Aubrey Edwards tried to step in, but got shoved away by both ladies, who then hit low blows on each other before hitting multiple headbutts at the same time for a double down, and the crowd comes to their feet with a rousing applause. Mariah May gets up. She dodged the Storm Zero. She hits Mayday. Toni kicks out. Mariah May tried to grab the women's title, but Luther on the outside. Remember, he got blasted by a drop kick on the outside, and he went right into the barricade. He pops up from the dead, and he grabs the title with his hand and takes it off the ring apron so that Mariah doesn't get it, and he gave her his own middle finger. May opted to grab a shoe that she had brought to the ring, the same bloody shoe that she beat Toni Storm with in Calgary at the end of the Owen final. But Toni Storm put a stop to that. May then starts begging Toni Storm off, apologizing. I'm sorry, I'm sorry. Toni takes the shoe, and she looks at Mariah. Revenge is coming. Until Toni can't do it. Toni can't bring herself to do it. May got a jackknife pin attempt off of this hesitation. She only got a 2 count, popped up, hit a running knee to the neck, kissed Toni Storm on the forehead, delivered with Toni's own Storm Zero. And Toni Storm loses to Mariah May from her own finishing move. And Mariah May is the new AEW Women's Champion. Mariah May celebrated up the ramp with the title. Toni Storm got to her feet, and she was in this weird bliss, was Toni Storm. She was crying at the same time, laughing and smiling, going back to crying and then waving to the fans and kissing people's hands and thanking everybody. It was this weird, multiple emotion type deal from Toni Storm. You didn't know what she was, happy, sad, depressed, upset. You didn't know. So it's going to be interesting to see where Toni Storm goes from this point on with the character. I've seen some people tell me this is not exactly how All About Eve ends. I don't know how All About Eve ends because I've never seen it. But I don't know where this goes. Jason, the Silent Monster, and I talked about this on Tuesday Night Titans when we did our predictions. He thinks that we're getting a second match. We could very well get that. But we got a clean ending here. Now, Mariah May, does she wrestle Toni Storm in 2 weeks at All Out? I don't know. We'll see what the follow-up is on AEW Dynamite. Maybe something happens on Dynamite in the next 2 weeks that leads us to a match in Chicago for a second time. I don't know. It's too early to tell, so I'm going to reserve judgment on that. But just based on what we got here, it doesn't really look like we're getting a second match. Again, we very well could. But just coming out of this, I don't really get a sense that we're getting a second match because Toni lost clean, and she put Mariah over, which was the right outcome. 9 months of storytelling. 9 months of emotion. Again, I said this multiple times already on this stream. If there's one thing that AEW takes from this show and should continue to do and use as a foundation and use as a blueprint for what they do every single time they have a major feud, it is this. Now, not everything's going to end up being Toni Storm and Mariah May. Not everything's going to end up being as emotional as Bryan Danielson winning the World Championship from Swerve Strickland in the main event of All In. But the reason why this match was as good as it was, and it probably would have been a good match with a mediocre story, but it was a better match with a great story. It was a better match because we were emotionally invested in what happened. We were emotionally invested in the attack by Mariah on Toni and looking to emotionally invest ourselves in Toni getting revenge only for her to fall short and lose the championship. Why was this match so great? Story. Story is everything. I don't give a shit what you do from this point on. I'm not expecting every story to be a fucking banger story. But if you could take just a little bit of emotion that you put into this story and apply it to multiple stories, I can't even begin to tell you how much better AEW television will be on a week-to-week basis. Sometimes we get it, sometimes we don't. This was the perfect story. This was the perfect setting. This was the perfect finale and the right outcome. Everything about this was poetic and beautiful. Mariah May wins the Women's Championship, and I can only hope that the follow-up to what Mariah May now does with the Women's Championship is just as good and follows the same blueprint as what we got with Toni Storm. This does not give AEW the excuse to say, all right, well, we got 10 months of story out of this. Now let's take a vacation. No. If you aren't already planning what Mariah is doing for her next feature film, I don't know why you're in the fucking business. Hopefully they have a plan. Hopefully.